Welcome to Product Knowledge, the podcast about branding and marketing innovative products that improve people's lives. I'm Andreas Schwabe, Director of Media Services at Graphos Product. Marketing is about differentiation. Everyone in business has thought about, rehearsed, or delivered an elevator speech about why you should choose their business. The largest differentiation you have may not be your product. In fact, focusing too much on selling your product features could be counterproductive. Research is clear that people make decisions on an emotional level and then consciously rationalize the decision to explain it. But how do you make use of knowing choices are emotional? How do you differentiate your business emotionally? Ken Aber and Ian Chamandy wrote the book, Why Should I Choose You? In 7 words or less. They've developed a process for companies to come up with more than just a mission statement. It's a promise and an attitude. Graphos CEO Laurier Mandin talked with Ian Chamandy on Skype from Toronto to do a deeper dive. He started things off by asking what the magic is around the book's 7-word subtitle.
Every company and every product has an essence to it, a thing that makes it uniquely remarkable. And then it has features and benefits that come out of that. But at the core is what is its essence. And part of the problem is companies only think in terms of features and benefits, figuring out what those are, and making sure that list is as long as possible to appeal to as many people as possible. Or they do think about what the essence is, but the process that they have for doing that is so superficial that it renders the answer meaningless. And then without the really good guidance of what is the essence, all of the rest of it falls apart. You know, we called frontline people on purpose. You could say, why didn't you talk to the executives whose job it is to define this? But the thing is, what we wanted to do is we wanted to find out, even if an executive could articulate it well, or reasonably well at least, did it make it down to the front line? Because that's where it matters. It doesn't matter that an executive knows what it is. He or she is not, going to be responsible for sales in the way the frontline people are. So we wanted to test the company's ability to communicate itself as spoken by the frontline people. And basically every company got an F. And it's because they don't go through the process of knowing who they are. So, and where this knowing who they are, the book is called Why Should I Choose You? Because that's one aspect of our process. But really at the center of our process is knowing who you are. And again, that's a question companies don't ask. And when they do, the process is usually too superficial. And so what we often do is we recite the Oscar Wilde quote. I wrote a long letter because I didn't take the time to write a short letter. Companies don't take the time to write the short letter. So they write the long letter that's rambling and sort of notionally, circuitously captures what they're about. And after you read the long letter, you go, I don't really get it. Whereas if you take the time to write the short letter, then people get it. So what we did is we said, all right, the short letter has to start with a 7-word or less headline. And that 7-word or less headline has to be the string that ties everything together. That it has to be the common thread. And when it captures, when it crystallizes everything about the company in a single compelling phrase, then that's all the frontline people need. And if they know who the company is and they've got some supporting, underlying narrative or dialogue of what that means to its fullest extent, then they can just start talking about the company. And you'll talk to 2 different frontline people in the same company, and they'll tell you the story in an entirely different way, but they will both communicate exactly the same thing because they're grounded in who the company or who the process is. And so none of these companies were able to articulate internally what it is that made them uniquely remarkable. So everybody in the organization is left sort of stumbling in the dark.
Yeah, what's amazing to me is that nobody seemed to know that question even was out there. Go ahead with the...
No. That's the thing. Most of them don't know that question exists. Clients often say to us, what do we do to prepare? And we say, you contemplate the question, if everything you do is a means to an end, what's your end purpose? And that sort of throws them for a loop, because they all think everything they do is the means to an end. And what that question says is, no, that's the means. Sorry, they think that everything they do is the end. And we say, no, that's the means to the end. What's the end purpose? Why do you exist? Like Simon Sinek, start with why. Why do you exist? What's your purpose? What is it that makes you uniquely remarkable? And express that in 7 words or less so that everybody can understand it, everybody can remember it, and everybody can repeat it.
I want to go back to the story about the company that you were talking about. It's a company called Interiors Inc., I believe, right? That has...
Yeah, I gave the punchline already.
That has that statement. Yeah. But what they came to discover was, they don't just create this industrial shelving in stores. They're not just selling and cookie cuttering these plans. What they really deliver to their customer, which is those stores like Home Depot, is getting those stores operating and selling and generating revenue weeks sooner, which can put millions of dollars into revenue into the businesses earlier and create an immediate success as soon as a store launches, and take away that big fear of opening late. So to me, they went with opening sooner, which is, it's a take on opening soon, which you see in front of stores already, and people get. It's kind of, it's in that vernacular already. And it just, in not 7 words, but 2 words, encapsulates so much about the value that's delivered. And also for everybody within that company, they know that that's the one thing that they've got to do. They're recognized for. They've sold this based on that this store is going to open sooner. So they've got no options. They've got to, if nothing else, they've got to
deliver. You're going to say it out loud. You got to deliver. It was an interesting conversation because we had breakfast with the CEO one morning. I'll give your listeners a context. This company does retail shelving, right? So Home Depot builds a box. They go in, they put up all the rack shelving, and when they're done, the store opens. So that's sort of the context for their business. And if you ran into the CEO at a party and you said, hey, what do you do for work? He would say, I do retail shelving. And so we're at breakfast with him, and he said, I know there's a magic to my company, but every time I open my mouth to talk about it, it sounds so generic, so banal, so like anything any of my competitors would say. And we said, John, it's because you don't know what business you're really in. And to his credit, without a delay, he replied, you're right, I don't know what business I'm really in. And that's so when he said at the cocktail party, I'm in the business of retail shelving, he's actually in the category of retail shelving. And there are lots of other companies in that category. What business is he in inside the category of retail shelving? And because they had been in business for 3 generations, as opposed to their competitors who were in business for 5 or 10 years, they had developed techniques and processes and systems and procedures that got their projects finished significantly faster. So as you said in the lead-in, if you can get a store open a week or 2 sooner, that's a week or 2 of retail sales that they wouldn't otherwise have. And at the time for Home Depot, that was north of $1 million a week for a store. So that was real money. And that's when, one of his executives said, purely as a joke, he said, in our signs where it says opening soon, I want ours to say opening sooner. Well, Ken's and my jaw hit the floor. And we just went, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And then we bulletproof the core proposition, which is primarily making sure that it resonates at a deep emotional level, not rational level. It resonates at a deep emotional level with all material stakeholders, but differently. It doesn't resonate with all of them in the same way. So to a VP of construction, it says, I'm at Home Depot, I'm going to generate revenue faster. For an employee, it says bragging rights, right? Like when you think of retail shelving, you don't think there's a whole lot to brag about in a business like that. But now, if you are recognized as the company that is all about getting finished faster, that's a cause, right? That's a purpose that's really interesting to you. So you have two different stakeholder groups. You have your customer, the VP of construction, who it resonates with one way, and you have your employees who it resonates with in another way. But with both of them, it resonates at a deep emotional level. And that's how, when it resonates with all material stakeholders, that's when we know we've got the right core proposition.
And that emotional resonance is so important. It's something that you devote a section in the book to talking about, and that was another area that really, it really resonated, no pun intended, with me, because, as human beings, we're not rational decision makers. We're rationalizing ones. So we make decisions based on things we're feeling, on what our gut is saying, on our lizard brain, that our limbic brain, and then we make the decision, and then we go and rationalize it, and that's where we might go back to those, the features and benefits. But to me, that was really meaningful, and that's what kind of got me thinking along the lines of, what is the biggest pain that my clients feel when they're coming to me? Is they know that they have blind spots. They know they have stuff they don't see. They know they don't, they can't look at stuff objectively. They don't have the experience they need to make these decisions. So that was where I could see that it's the stuff that we see that they don't. That's why, that's where we bring the value. It's not just in the fact that we can put together strategies and do these other things. It's that ability. But it was that part of the book, even though, that's the part I felt I should have known, because we spend a lot of time talking about how people make these buying decisions. When we apply it to ourselves, that was what made so much sense to me, is just understanding, okay, well, how do people make these decisions? They don't necessarily know what it is that their biggest fear is at this point.
Exactly. Which is why so much market research doesn't work. But it's, it was one of the interesting things for us in getting introduced to Simon Sinek 7 or 8 years ago. A friend of ours sent us an email saying, either you're ripping him off or he's ripping you off, or you've arrived in the same place at the same time. And it was the latter. But watching his TED Talk was fascinating for us, because it validated this whole notion of the core proposition on both a logical level and a neurological level, but also it was where, we got introduced to this whole idea of emotional decision making, about how you actually make decisions in the limbic part of your brain, which has no capacity for language, which is why we're often struggling to say, it's sort of intuitive, or it's vague, or I can't really explain. That's because it's trapped in your limbic system.
I can't put it into words because the limbic system doesn't have words. It just has these impulses and feelings.
So the decisions are made in the limbic system, and Simon Sinek does a wonderful job in this in his TED Talk, his original TED Talk, of explaining this. We then got a university as a client, and we were explaining all of this stuff. And then we found out the specialty of the president of the university who we were talking to, and it was basically along the lines of emotional decision making. And we said, do you agree with that we actually make decisions in our limbic system emotionally, and then we do an after the fact rationalization of the decision in our cerebral cortex? And she said, I hate to say it, but it's true. That's what the science says.
You guys have created a business around this. It's called Blueprint Business Architecture. And so you have a process to help businesses flesh this out. What does the process look like? How long is that?
Sure. It is 6 sessions of a half day each. It's done in our office. So we have our office is in a nice brownstone house in Midtown Toronto. Nice living room, 4 couches all facing each other. And we sit in a circle, up to 4 key decision makers from the company, one of whom must be the CEO. We won't do a blueprint without the CEO. And so we do 6 sessions of 3 hours each, usually a week apart. That's a great amount of time. In between sessions, everyone's thinking about stuff. And the conversation is percolating. So we actually start the next session farther ahead than we finished the last one. So that's sort of the core, is it's all done in conversation. And then at the end of it, over the 6 sessions, we've produced 20 or 25 pages of stream of consciousness notes. But we have established the core proposition, the 7 words or less. We've used it to modify the business architecture for the operations of the company. And then we've also used it to create what we call the core story, which is the top level strategic narrative of the organization. So what we say is a blueprint guides everything that you do and say. And so that's why we've got steps 2 and 3. Everything you do is your business architecture, your operations, day-to-day machinations of the company. Everything you say is your branding, your marketing, your sales, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is an element of the blueprint that extends to your operations, influencing how they work, and an element that extends to your communications, guiding what you say and how you say it.
And that part's really important, like the part where you're embedding it into the culture and you're creating that business architecture so that it's not just, in a Google Doc somewhere or, it's on the website. But when your people are out there, like all the people you talk to on those phone calls, they need to know that answer. They need to know and really be behind that messaging so that it's not just more garbage text that's more
word salad.
Yeah.
So when we do the business architecture, we say, okay, this is who you are in 7 words or less, and we look at each part of the business and we say, is this part aligned with who you are? And if the answer is yes, we don't touch it. That's great. And if the answer is no, we say, what do we need to do to get this part of the business into alignment with who you are? And that's how we get all the parts of the business working in lockstep towards a common goal. And then there are 6 for the core story. There are 6 questions that we have to answer. They're very difficult questions to answer in a short form, but that's what we have to do. We have to get them down to between 5 and 7 bullet points, and then what they do is they form this narrative. In the business architecture part of the blueprint, we never know what parts of the business are going to have to change until we're well into the blueprint. Except for 2 parts. We always know that a cultural, embedding of the blueprint in the culture of the company is a critical next step, and embedding the blueprint into the marketing story is always an important next step, because the marketing and sales story always changes as a result of the blueprint, because it's so much more powerful. It's so much more focused and it's so much more powerful. And companies usually want to rush to get that onto their website because they're excited now that they can explain their company for the first time.
Yeah, and there could be a direct connection between having that unique identity and revenue streams and ideally even overall sales, right? How does that come about? How does that come about when you changes your prospecting?
I'll give you a great example of that. We came to... we got called by this company called Eckler. Eckler is a mid-size actuarial firm that specializes in defined benefit pensions. Never in my life did I thought that I would get into the arcana of pension plans and that sort of thing, but here we were with Eckler. And as most people know who deal with these things, defined benefit pensions are very expensive and onerous for companies. So they're all switching to defined contribution. And you don't need actuaries for that. You need actuaries big time for defined benefit pensions. You don't need them for what the world is turning to. So Eckler, when they came to us, they said, we see our whole future disappearing, and figure that we have 5 to 7 years to play out this run, but then we're going to be in deep trouble. And we said, you need to know who you are at your core, and that will tell you where to go next. And we were stunned when actuaries said yes to that, because I can tell you this joke about actuaries because they told us. They said, how do you know when an actuary is an extrovert? when they look at your shoes when they're talking to you rather than their own. So, this is a very risk-averse community, and they decided to go ahead with this, with this non-traditional process. And where it got really interesting, we got them to talk, and we said, okay, here's what we heard in summary. You, your clients, the CEO and the CFO of a company, have to figure out what to do now with big chunks of money that are critical in the future. And they said, right. And you create mathematical models that help them figure out what decisions to make now about where big chunks of money are going to go in the future. That's correct. And you've given us these 3 compelling reasons why your mathematical models are better than your competitors. And they said, that's right. And we said, well, it sounds like you're in the business of predicting the future. And phew, all of their heads blew off. The tops of their heads blew off because that was just way too provocative a statement for them. But where the conversation got to was, no, you don't predict the future. But what you do is you create a greater degree of certainty about the future. That's what your mathematical models do. And if you don't create a greater degree of certainty and the confidence, the decision-making confidence that comes with that, then you have no value to the CEO or the CFO. So they adopted creating a greater degree of certainty as their core proposition. Now, to your original point about the impact on sales, when you are an actuary or a specialist in defined benefit pensions, your world is narrow and getting narrower by the day. But when you are in the business of creating a greater degree of certainty, all of a sudden, it's sort of like, the blinders that racehorses wear to restrict their view, right? Well, we all have blinders on about our business. You do, we do, everybody does. And whether those blinders are narrow or wide is dependent on how you define your business. And they had a definition they came up with a definition that widened the blinders, because before they had to find customers who needed their services in defined benefit pensions. Now they need customers who are experiencing uncertainty, don't know how to resolve that, but that uncertainty can be resolved by mathematical models. So all of a sudden, the blinders widen, and opportunities for business that always existed for you, but you never saw because of how narrowly you defined your business.
Yeah,
but you define it in this broader way that is totally relevant to your core skill set, and all of a sudden you see new opportunities for business that you never saw before. So when you know exactly who you should be talking to, you discover that that's a much bigger group, right? So you're afraid of getting too narrow because you narrow your target group, but by getting narrow, by getting focused, you actually expand your target group because you realize how many people really need your product. You didn't know that before. You only saw a small portion of the people who needed what you sell because of the limitations in how you defined yourself. When you have this more focused, but at the same time expansive definition, you see way more opportunities for business.
That's it for this episode of Product Knowledge and our conversation with Ian Chamandy, co-author with Ken Aber on the book, Why Should I Choose You in 7 Words or Less? You can get it on Amazon or visit 7words.biz. Visit graphosproduct.com where you can find out more about Graphos, our services, ideas, or more podcasts and our blog. All our podcasts are transcribed for the deaf and hard of hearing or for those who just prefer to read. Reach out on Twitter at graphosproduct or email us through the form on graphosproduct.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Andrea Schwabi.